Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Data Engineering Channel. I'm Chris Gambill with Gambill Data, and I am going to talk about today the super exciting news for data engineering this week. Um, so we have a bunch of exciting news, which is kind of abnormal for data engineering this week, and wanted to jump on today and talk through the Salesforce acquisition of Informatica, as well as DuckDB's DuckLake. So super excited about these couple of things and wanted to get into it. As I go through this, if you have any questions about what we're talking about, be sure to put them down in the comments, and we'll address it. Also, just say hi. Would love to know that you're here, and let me know. So again, I'm Chris Gambill, Gambill Data, and Salesforce is acquiring Informatica for $8 billion. DuckDB just launched DuckLake, and I'm going to be referencing some of the live sources throughout the stream. So if you want the receipts, stick around, and I'm going to show them to you. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the Salesforce acquisition of Informatica. So this has been actually, if you didn't hear about it like last year, I'd be surprised. There was the discussion about it last year. It was originally going to go for 10 billion, and unfortunately for Informatica, they lost $2 billion because they couldn't come to the right terms last year. So here's the headline: Salesforce is going to acquire Informatica for $8 billion. And this is the TechCrunch article, and it really lays out the details and some of the early reactions for this acquisition. And so, as you look down through here, you'll see that Informatica was founded in 1993. It has about 5,000 customers across 100 countries. If you don't know about Informatica, if you've not heard about Informatica, hey, Rory, good morning. Then I'd be surprised. If you're in data engineering, haven't at least heard about Informatica, I'd be surprised. Again, it originally was really one of the biggest ETL tools that we had early on. It's kind of lost its glamour over the years, and we'll get into some of that. But it's held its market share. With Informatica actually holds 14.8% of the global data integration market, and that's nearly double their next closest competitor. IDC actually ranks them number one across 5 different segments. So, again, kind of a huge deal from that perspective there. So I want to kind of show you, we've got some PureSpot reviews. Informatica reviews from PureSpot, look great, 4.0 out of 5. But what the practitioners actually say, PureSpot reviews kind of talk about the platform's power over the years. They have an on-premises offering called Power Center. They have their cloud offering, which is ICS, Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services. And so there's been talk, and you'll see it in reviews and you'll see it online, kind of, just murmurs about how the migration to the cloud's been extremely painful for a lot of those Fortune 500 companies that continue to use Power Center. Issues with connectors, exporting the XML data and trying to import it into ICS just isn't a just smooth transition. To be fair, neither is the transition from like ADF to Fabric. It's come a long way, but originally it was like a whole greenfield project to do that. So, and also, in comparison to a lot of other tools that allow you to maybe use Python or some other languages, Informatica, the big other language that it requires you to use is Java. So if you're not a Java person, then Informatica is probably not your cup of tea necessarily. And the comments that I've seen on LinkedIn here. Wanted to show you a couple, but you know, Ryan here says, with their latest acquisition of Informatica, following this purchase of Tableau, Salesforce is rapidly consolidating all the old tools we are trying to leave but are stuck with under one roof. And that that's I think that's a common feeling among especially data engineers, maybe not CIOs or data leaders, but I think amongst a lot of practitioners, this is kind of what they feel. Old tools that we're trying to leave but are stuck with it. Informatica's, again, if you've used Informatica, you'll know that Informatica is probably not your favorite go-to data integration tool. So again, let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to know if you feel the same way. If you used Informatica, do you do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know. So again, this is kind of the trending sentiment on LinkedIn. You see a lot of people being like, "Yeah, gun ho," and then you have this other side of it where they're like, "Are we just kind of adding more bad onto other issues?" So that's what it is, right? But what does this mean for you as a practitioner and a data leader, right? You know, the this and add me. There we go. So let's talk about some of the practical impact for your data stack, your budget, and maybe your career if you're an individual contributor. Um, you know, Generally, when a big company purchases another company, they're going to reevaluate the cost structure and kind of the how they're going to bill for it. Informatica already, the cloud offering already has a different cost structuring than a lot of other cloud offerings, right? Informatica Cloud bills by like number of rows processed, number of records processed, as opposed to the compute piece. There's some compute component there, but also number of records processed, which is different than a lot of the other cloud tools that are out there, like Databricks or any of the Azure tools or AWS. So, in addition, when when another company like Salesforce purchases a company like Informatica, you'll find that changes, especially up front, are maybe slower, maybe take longer to integrate new tools or new processes or changes to the platform. Hopefully that won't be the case with Salesforce. Hopefully Salesforce is going to come in and make some changes. Their big sale for this has been that they want to use it to help them kind of push forward their AI initiatives. And part of having a good AI initiative is having a good solid data foundation, right? You already have to have that clean, qualified, good data. Hey, Nikhil's here. So keep in mind these things when you're looking at setting your budget for next year, right? When you're looking at what your data stack's going to be, when you're looking at, are you currently looking at migrating from Power Center to IICS? And is that still the path you want to go with this acquisition? So just keep those things in mind, particularly as you are going through your roadmap for 2025 and 2026, right? Is this really the path that you want to continue to go down? But we won't, again, pricing, big vendors have a tendency to raise prices, not lower them. Kind of taking a look at my notes, make sure I cover everything. So again, if you're budgeting next year, keep an eye on that. The workflow for us, for the people that are individual contributors, there could be some short-term pains, right? Changes in support structure, new integration bugs, shifts in some of the roadmap and product direction. Informatica just had one of their conferences, and there wasn't a whole lot of talk about this, and probably legally there couldn't be, but wasn't a whole lot of talk about it. New integration bugs. It really comes down to how Salesforce is going to manage that transition of Informatica into their platform. And here's a hypothetical: if Salesforce announced tomorrow that they were going to buy something like DBT Labs or Airflow, would you be excited about it, or would you be like, "Oh no, really?" So yeah, I'd love to have that conversation with anybody that out there that has some thoughts on that. But um, one of the things, for me personally, as I migrated, I grew up. When I say grew up, was I mean kind of my learning curve, and my education was mostly in the Microsoft stack, and so I grew up with DTS packages and SSIS, and then moving into ADF and Synapse, and then also layered in some Python and AWS Glue and Docker and all the various other tools that are out there. When I migrated from those tools to all of a sudden jumped into using Power Center, it was incredibly painful for me because it felt so incredibly disjointed compared to some of those other tools, right? Compared to ADF and Synapse, where everything is kind of and even Glue, right, where everything's kind of self-contained. um, if you haven't used Power Center, then you don't know this, but there is one software, one like execution package for your monitor, one for your modeling, right? One for actually doing the modeling, a completely separate one for doing your workflow. And then you have another one for like file management, creating a completely separate one for file management. So if you're used to using ADF and things like that, and Glue, then moving to Power Center and even moving to ICS may feel a little disjointed to you. However, I'll say that for government agencies, for healthcare, for highly regulated agencies, Informatica provides a level of governance and security that some of those other tools don't. So that's kind of the trade-off there. And so that's why people have a tendency to go towards Informatica in those situations. Um, Awesome. So again, for those of you that are here, stop in, say hi. We've got Rory, we've got Nikhil. Whether you're on, let me know if you're on LinkedIn or if you're on YouTube, because we're broadcasting to both right now. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to cover as far as the Informatica and Salesforce situation there. But yeah, it's if you love it, I would love to know it. Do you love Power Center? For those of you that are out there watching, is Power Center something that you love using? Is it your preferred tool? Just curious, because it's not my preferred tool. Again, it has its place, and has some great tools when it comes to creating APIs and hitting APIs. But so do some of the other cloud tools. So. But there's definitely room for both opinions. So let's jump into DuckDB and DuckLake, right? Filter over to here. So we've got, as far as DuckDB and DuckLake, over in kind of, this is the open source land, right? DuckDB just announced yesterday, they just launched yesterday, DuckLake, and it's a SQL managed Lakehouse format built on Parquet, right? Which a lot of those Lakehouse formats are built on Parquet or Delta, right? But this is the official announcement and a quick tour of the project, right? DuckLake, SQL as a Lakehouse format. The TLDR here just says that DuckLake simplifies lakehouses by using a standard SQL database for all metadata instead of complex file-based systems, while still sorting data in open formats like Parquet, making it more flexible, faster, and easier to manage. And there's a diagram down below that we'll kind of look at with what that looks like, what that kind of lakehouse structure looks like for DuckLake. there's some background here. I'll be sure to put these links down in the comments for anybody that's interested in taking a look at these as well, or if you want to follow along. Um, but yeah, people really like lake houses, right? You have Databricks, you have in Azure you have Fabric, which depending on your architecture of Fabric, it probably is very much like housey. Um, and there's plenty of other tools. You might be using AWS in a lakehouse type format with using S3 containers, and then maybe layering either Snowflake or maybe even like an RDS Postgres on top of that. Um, so so people like lake houses to be able to use that kind of medallion architecture is generally how you are using that lake house um, architecture. So, and there, we have iceberg and everything else, right? So the big thing, right, that DuckDB doesn't have is the ACID transactions. Well, with the Lakehouse, they're introducing your ability to layer in and use either a MySQL or I'm going to jump over to this one here real quick. You could use a catalog database, right? You could use Postgres, you'd use SQLite, MySQL, or you'd stay with the DuckDB, right? And you don't necessarily have the ACID transactions, but you have, the fast and the speed, which again, from a perspective of, um, from the perspective of getting things done quickly, DuckDB is great. From the perspective of using petabytes of data, probably going to have to migrate over into one of those other tools still, but still a great option, especially as you're prototyping things, especially for programmers, maybe backend devs, things like that, even for data engineers. Again, but exciting that now we could use these other databases as well via the DuckLake format. So I'd love to know down in the comments, for those of you that have used DuckDB, let me know. Do you love it? Do you hate it? What are your pros and cons of using it? I'd like to know everybody else's feedback as well. So again, this is their kind of interactive demo sites, and you could actually play with DuckDB right now. And it's this DuckLake.select, which I thought was a kind of a quirky take on, select all, right? But DuckLake.select will kind of get you to this platform where you could kind of, watch the video introducing DuckLake and kind of read all the documentation, and even potentially kind of see some of the interactivity of it. But it gives you information on how to install DuckLake via Python, and which, depending on which database you want to integrate with that. So pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit about DuckDB's growth here over the years, right? It's up to 6 million downloads per month. Here's the Wikipedia page here, and you can kind of see how rapidly adoption has grown over the years. It was first released in 2019, specifically, and version 1.0.0 was released on June 3rd, 2024, under the codename Snowduck, right? So kind of neat. But you kind of see how rapidly adoption has grown over the years. So, again, up to 6 million downloads a month. DBT Labs has even blogged about why DuckDB is changing some of the modern analytics platforms, right? It's super fast, flexible, open source, gives you an alternative to something like SQLite, and really kind of has that speed and flexibility that SQLite doesn't. And then we also have, I brought up, the DuckDB reviews, and you just from PeerSpot again, and you'll see 4.5 out of 5, which is an awesome stat, right? 4.5 is, considerably better than the 4.0 from Informatica. People seem to really like DuckDB. Again, it's not been a big enterprise. Enterprises haven't really adopted a lot. Again, mostly because of the scalability, but that may be changing with the launch of DuckLake, right? Um, and then we also had, but especially, people that are doing independent projects, people that are, testing things out, creating some just applications on their own. DuckDB is super flexible, again, fast and easy to integrate. And again, open source. So, the free part definitely has a level of attractiveness to it for individual practitioners. So I want to just kind of wrap everything up here, and then we'll get into any questions that you all may have. Or actually, I want to go back real quick to the this DuckLake. So it says here, DuckDB, we actually like databases. Amazing tools, safely and efficiently manage fairly large data sets. Once the database has entered the Lakehouse stack anyways, it makes an insane amount of sense to also use it for managing the rest of the table metadata. And so that's kind of what they're doing, right? You have the iceberg catalog here in the database layer. You have your metadata layer that we're going to start using, again, the database for it, whichever database of choice that you've chosen to use. And then you have your data files, which is kind of your bronze layer, your Parquet files, your raw data that's coming in. And so you're kind of pushed into Parquet format, but then you actually get to use the database layer as well. So it helps to resolve some of the fundamental problems of existing lakehouses. Again, open table format called DuckLake. It kind of reimages what the Lakehouse format should look like and acknowledges that storing data files in open format on Blob is great for scalability and prevents some lock-in. And managing the metadata is super complex. And interconnected data management tasks best left for a DBMS, right? Database management system. So, so that's a lot of the considerations here. And yeah, move that back to me. So kind of wrapping everything back up right together. Are we headed for some vendor lock-in with? Do you think that we're headed for some vendor lock-in with the Salesforce and Informatica, acquisition? Or do you think that DuckDB's open source innovation is really going to be the path forward, especially as we, start to integrate more AI into our businesses? Let me know what you think down in the comments. I'd love to hear everybody else's opinion. And if you're watching the replay, let me know down in the comments as well. For those of you that are here with me now, let me know down in the chat. So links to all the articles and resources are going to be in the description. I'll drop them down in the chat for those of you that are here with me on the live stream so that you could continue to dig in and read these full articles. If this made you rethink your stack, or maybe you want, more in-depth breakdowns like this, let me know. Let me know down in the comments. Let me know by subscribing and liking the video. And, let's continue to keep the conversation going. And for those of you that haven't heard my new catchphrase, until next time, and we'll take questions here in a minute, but until next time, keep your pipelines clean and your queries lean. But that's my spiel. So again, now we're to the part where it's just us. This is generally the part of the live streams where I do kind of AMAs, right? Ask me anything. Do you have questions about data engineering? Do you have questions about, the integration of AI with, some of these tools, especially with like Agentforce and that's Salesforce's AI, right? And what does Informatica being acquired mean? Yeah, thanks, Mike. Hopefully it helps. Absolutely. for those of you that are pivoting into data engineering, maybe from either another career or maybe just straight out of university, or even out of high school, maybe. Uh, what has been your biggest challenge in learning data engineering? Is it finding good content? Is it finding interesting content? Finding good projects to practice your skills? I'd love to know. You'll excuse me for drinking a lot of coffee. I was up late trying to find a bunch of good resources for some of these discussions. But I know we've got Nikhil. I know we've got Rory. I know we've got Mike. Let me know who else is out there. Say hi. Let me know. Do you have any questions about, again, the about DuckLake, about Informatica? Informatica is definitely a tool that I've been using the past handful of years, and there's definitely some companies that have used it for decades, right? But the first time I used it, I definitely felt like I was going back in time to circa 1993, using a very disjointed tool. Again, it has its place, and there are people out there that really like it. I've never met anybody that really loved it, but there are people out there that really like it, and it's a good tool to know because it's a niche kind of specialty. For those of you that do have that Informatica training and background, there's definitely positions that are Informatica focused, and you're going to have a lot less competition for Informatica roles than you will for like an ADF, for an Azure data engineer or a AWS data engineer type role. And just because a company has Informatica definitely doesn't mean that they don't have Azure or Snowflake. It often, they still have to have that other cloud platform to store their data, and for their DBMS, right? For the their OLAP database, whether they're using a serverless Synapse database, SQL database, or they're using a Snowflake, if they're using Snowflake. So definitely still, it's just the integration and orchestration tool. And I've seen some incredibly complex orchestrations using Informatica. I mean, hundreds of tasks within an orchestration. So super interesting. Finding content that teaches you not how to build an ETL from scratch. Some videos I've seen open up VS Code with YAML files, etc., already made. Okay, that's fair. And I think that's true. So I'll say that there is a guy right now. Let me open up YouTube here. That he walks through on Fridays. Let me find him. His name is Andy Leonard, and he does these data engineering Fridays. And right now, he's doing the series on creating a Azure pipeline from scratch and how to add in some layered kind of alerting and quality checks and kind of storing that metadata. So that could be a good resource for you. Andy does a great job with that. But it doesn't mean that I can't put something together and as well. That's a great suggestion. Trying to find my way back to grab the link, trying to find my way back to the stream. Oh, there it is. So this is Andy's. That's Andy's LinkedIn. Now, as far as doing it like from scratch from Python, right? That's something that I walked through early on in some of my videos. So if you go back to some of my early videos, I did some kind of full ETL processes from scratch, integrating Marvel. That kind of there's a API that you can connect to Marvel data, right? As you could see from some of the things in my room here with me, I am a nerd. I like Marvel. I like Star Trek, Star Wars, anything anything techie, and kind of that direction. Um, but I did one for Marvel. I did one for Rick and Morty. Uh, the Rick and Morty one is more Azure based, right? Is walking through creating a pipeline, actually hitting the API, and from scratch, right? Creating the connections, creating the different tasks in the pipeline and ADF, and then the same with the Marvel piece, right? Actually, writing the script, talking through the libraries that you need in order to create the ETL process, talking through the requests library so you could hit that API, talking through the PyODBC library so that you could connect to your SQL server or whatever whatever database tool of choice, engine of choice that you use. And it walks through pulling the data, cleaning the data, creating some of the modeling, and even all the way out to connecting it to Power BI and creating some visualizations, including like using links for actually hitting the link and grabbing the image from that link so that you could populate it in Power BI. So feel free to go out and check that out. I could put that link down in the comments too if that's something that you're interested in. But yeah, so those are it. That's fair. There's not a ton that teaches you how to build it from scratch, right? And a lot of that is because it takes time. And to record a video that does that, those videos that I did were 45 plus minutes. And so it takes time to do the video, to record the video. It takes time to do the editing. Hopefully people find a lot of use out of them, but they're not usually videos, especially on YouTube, that end up getting a lot of views, mostly because they're so incredibly long. Probably could be broken up into a series, but I did them as one big one. But again, I want to say it was like 45 minutes. I want to say both of them were like 45 minutes. So, but let me put that just in case you are interested. I want to say it's a playlist. Trying to find it. So as I'm looking for this, does anybody else have any questions about data engineering? About again, this exciting again, data engineering doesn't usually have a week like this where there's so many big news stories that come out all at once. Not only did we have the acquisition of Informatica by Salesforce and DuckLake, but there were a couple of others out there that were pretty significant news for data engineering. There was one that was not such good news, right? Kind of going back and talking about the ransomware attack to MathLab. And if you don't know what MATLAB is, go down and research it. It's definitely a tool that is useful for any data professional. But there was a ransomware attack there, and then there is also the Snowflake and Snowflake and DataOps Live integration. DataOps Live has this unveiled this dynamic suite for Snowflake. And so it's this kind of free Snowflake native apps for CI/CD and DBT operationalization. So if you use Snowflake and you've used DataOps Live, which is a great tool, those workflows really make things really smooth. DataOps Live has done a good job there, I think, at least reading some of the documentation. But videos, Marvel, end-to-end project. Here it is. So, it's just 30 minutes. So not as long as I thought it was going to be. As far as how many projects you should complete before applying for data engineering positions, I I think that it depends, right? Uh, for me, I kind of have this process with my mentees where I start with having them identify, going out and researching job recs and finding five positions that when they look at it, like they're like, this is what I want. This is like the perfect job for me, right? And we take those five and we evaluate kind of the tools and the skills that are listed in those job recs, and we focus their training on that. And when you get to the point where you feel comfortable, where you feel like, okay, I feel comfortable with this, I could explain it in my own words, not in an overly technical way, in, actually like layman's terms. Um, and they understand it in that on that technical side as well, then you're in a good spot to start applying for data engineering positions, right? So it depends on your how much you learn from each project, how comfortable you feel after each project, kind of what your aptitude level is going into the projects. So it I would say like a minimum of 3 projects, 3 good size, like end to end full projects. Because I think as a data engineer, you need to know not only the data engineering piece, but you need to definitely understand the architecture piece, right? Because you're going to have to be doing modeling. A lot of companies that you go to, they don't have an architect. They don't have, even like a data ops or DevOps position. You're doing all those things. You're setting up resources. You are doing, again, the architecture, laying out and designing how things are going to roll out. um, and sometimes you're even that analytics person too, or at least you should understand that analytics person or that BI engineer's role in how they're receiving that data, how they're using that data, so that you could best serve them. Because a lot of times, those BI engineers, those analysts, and those machine learning engineers and those data scientists, those are a lot of times your customers, your internal customers that you're serving with that data along with your business stakeholders. Um, so it's my 2 cents. I'm just gonna pull up here. I'm gonna pull up the website. For those of you that don't know, we have a website, Gambill Data Engineering, and here it is. So I also do consulting on the side, but I have a mentoring program here, and this kind of talks through, what each of the steps are. Again, you'll see we evaluate skills, identify 5 job postings. In addition, there is um, a self-assessment that you do, right? Um, and it'll come up here in a second. But there's this mentee skill assessment and quiz. You'll fill this out. Once you fill it out and you rank kind of your skills at the end of this, uh, you'll submit your self assessment, and it'll come up with 10 questions to assess kind of your skills based on how you've assessed your skills. And based on that, I'll get some information. And so this is just a Streamlit app. That also integrates with ChatGPT to come up with those SQL questions, those data engineering questions based on how you rank yourself. But you'll do the self-assessment. We'll identify those 5 job postings. I'll come up with a specific project for you. Again, and you do all these things yourself, right? Identify 5 job postings, identify the skills and the tools that are in common to those 5 job postings, focus on learning those things, create your own real world project, right? Take a subject that is passionate to you, something that excites you. My capstone project for my master's degree was about standardized educational testing, right? And uh, relating that to how much each state spent on education and what that looked like as far as how much a state would need to spend in order to get their average standard test to be above the average for the country. Um, and so I did some. That was kind of my project. I'm passionate about education, and but pick a project, pick a real world subject that is exciting to you, because then when you turn around and you're talking about those situations and those scenarios that you went through in that project, then it's gonna help that passion and that excitement to come out during your interview as well. Um, we'll again, there's a bunch of steps here: personal branding and networking. Once you get through your data engineering projects, interview prep. Again, be sure that you're practicing before you walk into an interview. Make sure that you come up with 5 behavioral questions and 5 or 6 technical questions that you're practicing in a mirror, talking to somebody. If you have somebody that you could actually be talking to on the other side of a camera or in person, then that will help kind of get rid of some of those nerves and those jitters when you walk into the interview, right? um, so that is the mentoring program that I do. Interview from Europe. Question for you. Yeah. So accepted in data science and engineering master's program. Awesome. Congratulations. Um, but I have hearing AI is replacing data engineers soon. Um, so that is a common question, and so I did it. I did a video. I'm not trying to just self promote, but I did do a video recently, and it kind of played on that theme, right? Of the fact that AI, I for most of the last year in my videos, when you go back through them, you'll hear me say AI is not coming to take your job. AI is not coming to take your job, and I did this video about a couple weeks, maybe a week or two ago, and this is the link here coming through on the chat. Um, the reality is that in data engineering, I've been doing this for 25 years, and in data engineering, you're always having to constantly learn. That your drive and your excitement about learning something new has to be something that you have at the beginning, and even now after 25 years I'm still excited about. You could tell when I'm talking about like DuckLake, right? And talking about why I learned Informatica. There's some frustration and some struggles, but through that frustration and struggle there's this excitement, this passion for learning new things and new tools and new platforms. um, there's always been, when we moved from on-prem to the cloud, they said, okay, this is going to be more efficient. We're not going to need as many of you anymore. I remember seeing that theme, that conversation out there. And here's the reality. The reality is that there is so much tech debt out there. There's so much data out there. There's so much work to be done that data engineers aren't going away. Um, there's an issue right now, uh, where there's not a whole lot of juniors being hired, and I think we're going to run into a wall where we start seeing some of the seniors and the staff data engineers start to retire, and we don't have enough juniors that have come up through the ranks to kind of take their place and step into those roles. um and that's a leadership issue, right? That's a corporate leadership issue that's going to need to be addressed at some point, because here's the reality is that AI can't do what AI does unless the data is centralized and clean and in a place where AI can get to it all at once. You know what data engineers do? They get the data, they clean it, they put it in a central location so that analytics and data science and machine learning engineers and AI can get to it, and so they could do those things. This it it's not going. Data engineering is not going anywhere. You're going to have to learn new tools. You're going to have to learn to use AI effectively and to be able to integrate it into your daily workflows. But data engineers are not going anywhere. as far as the harsh truth is, you're always going to have to learn something new. You could go and get your master's degree, and I did it myself, um, and it's great, um, but you're always going to have to learn. There's always going to be something new. There's always going to be a new tool, new process, a new concept that you're going to have to learn. You know, data mesh, right? There's been so many things. KQL, uh, the pipe syntax for SQL, right? KQL tried to do it. Every 5 or so years, there's some new SQL-ish programming language that somebody comes up with that is going to come through and take over and be the new SQL. And after 50 odd years, SQL is still the language of choice for all data professionals, and it's not going anywhere, right? But yeah, and as part of it is because SQL continues to evolve as well, right? When we look at the more modern database engines and how well they've adapted their SQL to to take on and handle things like semi-structured data sets like JSON and XML and things like that, talking about Snowflake and things like that. And then we have some amazing orchestration tools like Orchestra, right? That's coming up and really starting to grow and take on some steam. So yeah, hopefully that helps, Bernardo. And congratulations on being accepted into your master's program. I'm sure it'll be great. I loved my master's program. All right. Great conversation today, guys. Thank you all so much for jumping on. We're nearing the top of the hour. Absolutely. You're welcome. Mike, Bernardo, Rory, Nikhil, thank you all so much for jumping on with me. Thank you for joining in the conversation, and be sure to join me again. I try to do these live sessions once a week. This week was Wednesday. Usually I think I'm gonna usually they're Friday evenings. The next 2 Fridays we do have not this Friday, but next Friday and the following Friday we have special guests. Again, for those of you that weren't on our previous sessions, next Friday we have, where's the screen that I'm sharing here? We have Lindsay, and she'll be on. Lindsay generally works with nonprofits, and she also has her own YouTube channel called The Data Coach. And again, there it is. Let me share my screen again here. Add The Data Coach. And so Lindsay will be on with us next Friday on June 6th at 10 p.m. Eastern. And she, again, generally works with nonprofits. So we're going to have a discussion about what it's like working in a nonprofit organization, right? Working with nonprofit organizations, especially when it comes to data organization. And I think it's very similar when you're working with the public sector. There's some concept of they kind of lag behind when it comes to technology, generally because of the governance and kind of security issues that come along with it. And so, a lot of them are still out there using Excel files and CSVs and trying to create some kind of reporting. Thank you, and thanks for liking my LinkedIn post. Yeah, dude, that's awesome. Snowflake's one of my favorite platforms. For those of you that don't know, Mike recently earned one of the SnowPro badges. Super excited for him, and anytime that you could get something like that, my suggestion for all of you that are out there, if you're going into data engineering, pick a tool that you like using, whether that's Databricks, whether that's Snowflake, whether that's Azure, AWS, whichever, pick a cloud platform, pick a ETL tool that you could really focus on and gain some depth of knowledge. And focus on that and earn a couple of those certifications. Don't go out and earn every certification. No hiring manager is going to care that you have 50 certifications. They're going to care that you can demonstrate that you have the depth of knowledge in a specific skill set that and a specific tool that they're using that they need for their business, and show that you can learn, so that you show that you have the passion for that learning. So absolutely. It's a start. It is a start. And anytime that you could show that you go to those, again, that shows your passion for learning. Incredibly important in this profession. But so Lindsay will be on next Friday on June 6th at 10 p.m. Eastern. And then we have another super special guest the following week. Shane Gibson. And Shane recently wrote a book for talking about the Agile Data Guide and information product canvas. So it's super excited for Shane to come on. Here's his book that he wrote, Information Product Canvas. You could go out and get put the link to that down in the comments. Boom, 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 copy. But super excited to have Shane on in a couple weeks. Again, 10 p.m. on the week after the 6th, on the 13th, Friday the 13th, at 10 p.m. So super excited to have him on as well. Shane will be a great. There'll be a great discussion with Shane, and alternatively, it is on May 1st. I'm going to be on his podcast. We're good. It's a recording, but he'll release that podcast, and we're going to talk about different. Oh my gosh, I lost the word. Patterns. We're going to talk about patterns, and what patterns are basically kind of predefined workflows of how you process a certain situation, right? If you're going from an API into Snowflake, this is the process. These are the tools, the resources that you need to perform that project, right? And it documents, patterns are documenting out what that looks like. I have a pattern where for Databricks, I create a notebook so that for all the resources, all the other notebooks within that Databricks environment, there's a consistent way that we are that we're doing like pip installs, right? So that, for instance, every notebook that's having to do some type of pip install doesn't do it differently. Some might use like the magic command, some might use like an OS and do like Python-M, some might use a wheel, some might use PyPy. So making that consistent is important for maintainability, and it's important especially when you're troubleshooting issues. And so again, being able to have those types of patterns in your back pocket is incredibly important. Why do I have that? Connection is unstable. I wonder why. Okay, so we're going to be talking about patterns on his Agile Data podcast. He's going to jump on to my podcast, and we're going to have a great discussion, and looking forward to those next couple weeks. So hopefully you could join. Again, that's going to be at 10 p.m. Eastern on those Fridays, the 6th and the 13th. I look forward to seeing you there. And again, until next time, keep your pipelines clean and your queries lean.